An introduction to the absolute value. I'm going to use a number line to introduce the concept of what an absolute value is all about. So let's just look at any random number. Say, for example, the number 3. How far is the number 3 on the number line away from 0? So we see that 3 is 3 units away from 0. So you got 1, 2, 3. So the distance between 3 and 0 is 3 units. Similarly, if I look to the left of 0, I ask myself, how far is negative 3 away from 0? So negative 3 is also 3 units away from 0. So we say that the absolute value of a number can be regarded as the distance the number is from 0 on a number line. The absolute value of a number is also the magnitude of that number. So I write that the absolute value of 3 is 3 because the number 3 is 3 units away from 0. And I also write that the absolute value of negative 3 is 3 because negative 3 is 3 units away from 0 looking at the number line. So formally, I can define that the absolute value of x and the symbol for the absolute value are these two vertical lines. So the absolute value of x can be positive if x is greater than 0. It can equal to 0 when x equals to 0. And it can be negative for all values of x less than 0. I'm going to continue to illustrate the concept of an absolute value just using numerical examples. So if I ask you what is the absolute value of 7 subtract 5? So how far are these two numbers from each other? 7 minus 5 is 2 because 7 is 2 units from 5, or 5 is 2 units from 7. So we say that the absolute value of 7 minus 5 is the absolute value of 2, and the number 2 is 2 units away from 0 on a number line, or the distance between 0 and 2 is 2 units, so the absolute of 2 is 2. If I swap these numbers and I write 5 minus 7, so the absolute value of 5 minus 7. I know that 5 subtract 7 is negative 2, so this gives me the absolute value of negative 2. I once again ask myself, how far is negative 2 away from 0 on a number line? And I know that the distance between negative 2 and 0 is 2 units, so the absolute value of negative 2 is 2. We're going to formalize this concept that we've just looked at, and if we let 7 equal to x and 5 equal to y, so 5 is y and 7 is x, then I know that the absolute value of x minus y, so this absolute value of 7 subtract 5 was the absolute value of 2, which is 2, which is the same answer as the absolute value of y minus x. A very important concept to remember when dealing with absolute values. I'm now going to ask you, what about minus the absolute value of 5 minus 7? So this is going to be minus 1 times the absolute value of 5 minus 7. So we know that that 5 subtract 7 is negative 2, so it's going to be minus 1 times the absolute value of negative 2. So this is minus 1. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2, and this gives you negative 2. So I can clearly state that the absolute value of y minus x is not equal to minus the absolute value of y minus x. We're now going to look at two useful properties regarding absolute values. The first one says that the absolute value of x is equal to the square root of x squared. And to prove these properties to you, or to illustrate these properties to you, I'm going to use numbers. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the first equation, and I have a left-hand side and I have a right-hand side. And I'm going to choose any number. Suppose I'll let x equals to 5. So if I look at my left-hand side, I know that the absolute value of positive 5 is 5, because positive 5 is 5 units away from 0 on a number line. I also know that the absolute value of negative 5 is 5, because negative 5 is also 5 units away from 0 on the number line. Looking at the right-hand side of that equation, I'm asked to find the square root of x squared. So if x is 5, the square root of x squared will be the square root of 5 squared, which is the square root of 25, which is 5. And if x equals to negative 5, then the right-hand side will be the square root of negative 5 squared, which is still the square root of 25, which is 5. So therefore, the absolute value of x equals to the square root of x squared. The second property says that the absolute value of the product of two numbers is the same as the product of the absolute values. So let x equal to negative 2 and y equal to 3. Once again, we divide our equation into a left-hand side and a right-hand side. I'm now going to look at the left-hand side. So the left-hand side is asking me to calculate the absolute value of the product of x and y. So that means I must work out what is the absolute value of negative 2 times 3. Negative 2 times 3 gives you negative 6. What is the absolute value of negative 6? So how far is negative 6 from 0 on a number line? It is 6 units. Let's look at the right-hand side. The right-hand side is asking me to calculate the product of the absolute of x and the absolute value of y. So the absolute value of x is going to be the absolute value of negative 2 multiplied by the absolute value of 3. And the absolute value of negative 2 is 2, because negative 2 is 2 units away from 0 on the number line. So the distance between negative 2 and 0 is 2 units. So the absolute value of negative 2 is going to be 2, and the absolute value of 3 is 3, and this gives me 6. So therefore, left-hand side equals to right-hand side.